I didn't record this morning because it wasn't in the right place.
Right.
So I wanted to. I know last night I recorded, so we'll start from where we left off last night. And I apologize. I got mixed up with where everybody was holding. When we were holding in different places, I end up sometimes getting confused. Okay, so
this is where we left off on Friday with Aaron Weisbrod.
But I think Motzei Shabbos last night we ended up on 2 dots.
That's where we ended up on Friday also.
Okay, so let's start from here and we'll get cracking. Amar Rabbi Gamliel, Ma'aseh b'tzeduki echad sheyidar imam. So if we go back to the very first Mishnah of the parak, there's a very interesting story. The Mishnah is discussing a goy, and the Mishnah says a goy needs to have schirus. You can't have a goy be mevatel his place. You actually have to rent the space of the goy. And then all of a sudden, Rabbi Gamliel jumps in with a story.
Tzeduki isn't the guy.
That's right. All of a sudden, Rabbi Gamliel jumps into Tzeduki, which has nothing to do with what the Mishnah was talking about. And that's exactly what the Gemara's kasha is. Correct the Gemara, Tzeduki man dechar shemei. Tzeduki is not a goy. Why is Rabbi Gamliel introducing a story here that's about a Tzeduki? It's actually missing. And this is what it should say. Tzeduki harei kanachi. After the Mishnah discusses what halacha by a goy that needs schiris, then the Mishnah says that Tzeduki is like a nachri, and that Tzeduki will also need schiris. And then Rabbi Gamliel comes to argue. Rabbi Gamliel Omer Tzeduki is ain't a kanachi. A Tzeduki is a yid. But Amar Rabbi Gamliel, I'll even tell you a story to prove that a Tzeduki is like a yid, because Ma'aseh b'Tzeduki echad sheyidar imanu b'mavi b'Yerushalayim. There was a Tzeduki that lived in our neighborhood in Yerushalayim. But Amar lanu Abba, and our father said before Shabbos, Maru v'aytzias hakelim l'mavi. Quickly take your kelim out to the mavi. So what happened was this Tzeduki did not make an eruv together with everybody else. So because of his interest in the chutzner, it asks to everybody. So the Tzeduki was mevatel his rishus. After he was mevatel his rishus, my father said, quickly take your kelim and put it into the mavi. Because if the Tzeduki decides to change his mind and brings out his kelim into the chutzner, he's going to be reclaiming his rights into the chutzner, and then you won't be able to carry there anymore. But once you put your kelim there, you're being machzik in the land, and he can't go back on his word. You've taken over the land, and therefore he won't be able to go back on his word. That's what the first nusach is in the Mishnah. So let's just go back to the Mishnah, because we're going to now be focusing on the later parts of this Mishnah. So what did he say? Maru b'aytzius hakelim l'mavui ad shelo yotzi, before the Tzeduki might change his mind, v'yeser aleichem, and he will then answer you. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'lashon acher. That's not what Rabbi Gamliel's father said. He said something else. He said, Maru b'asu tzarkechem b'mavui ad shelo yotzi v'yeser aleichem. Do whatever you have to do quickly, because once he takes out his stuff, it's usher. So the difference between these two nuschayos are, in the first nusach, once you place your kelim there and you're machzik in it, the Tzeduki would not be able to go back on his word. But in the second nusach, where Rabbi Yehuda said, you better get your stuff done, because the moment he puts out his stuff, it's going to be usher, that shows that Tzeduki could go back on his word. So put whatever you need wherever you need it now, because later you might not be able to put it there. Those are the two nuschayos in our Mishnah. We're going to see the Brisa is slightly different. So let's see what the Brisa says that the Gemara is quoting. V'atanya, we looked in the Brisa. Hadorim Nachri Tzeduki Batusi. So you see they're all lumped together. If one lives in a Mobi together with a Nachri, a Tzeduki, or a Batusi, Harei Elu Oishun Alof. Since they have an interest in the chutzner with him, they answer him if he didn't make an error with them. And sometimes he can't. The guy he can't. He has to rent it to the guy. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, Tzeduki Betusi Ein Yinoshvin. A Tzeduki and a Betusi are eaten, and they don't answer, and they could be mevatel. And I'll prove it to you. What My children, maru quickly. Quickly, whatever you want to take from your homes and put it into the chutzner and the mavli. And whatever you want to take from the mavli and chutzner and bring it back into your homes, do it quickly. So that this lowlife shouldn't put his kalim out, and then he's going to make everything usher. Because he was mavatal his rishus to you. Divi Reb Meir, that's what Reb Meir holds. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, B'loshen Acheres. It was spoken a little differently. It said, "Vasutzar chechem b'mavui." Quickly do whatever you have to do. Ad sheloi tershach before Shabbos, because then the yesar aleichem. So in the second lashon, Rabbi Yehuda is clearly saying that the bittul that the goy did is zero. It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't work. And therefore, he said you better move whatever you want to move, wherever you want to move it before Shabbos, because after Shabbos you do not have an erev. I mean, during Shabbos, once erev starts, after Shabbos starts, you do not have an erev. So this is the whole different shot. Here it's saying that a tzedaki cannot make bittul at all. So that's the brisa.
Is a tzedaki like a reform or conservative Jew?
So that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. At what point do you lose your status of a Jew that you can no longer be mevatel? That's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Omar Mar. So now we're going to go back to analyze what the brisa said. Haitziu ma she'atem motzim. Gamliel's father said, take whatever you want out. V'chnisu ma she'atem machnisim. Ad shelo yotzi atoyev hazeh. Before this lowlife comes and puts his kalim out in the chutzner, the yesar aleichem, and he's going to answer for you. So it sounds like that if you put your kalim out quickly, then the tzedaki wouldn't be able to reclaim the land. Remember, the chimavki inu, if they put their kalim out first, the hadim mafikiu, even if afterwards he puts his kalim out, loy asar, the tzedaki won't be able to answer because you've already made a chazaka in the property. So Zok the Gemara, if that's the case, Vatnan we learned in a brisa. So Vatnan we learned in our Mishnah that our Mishnah says not like that. Because our Mishnah says, Mi shenosan rishusay. Now this is not our Mishnah. This is I believe it's a later Mishnah that we're about to learn later today. Mi shenosan rishusay. Somebody who gave up his rishus, meaning he was mevatel his rishus, v'hoitzi, and then he brought his kalim out into the chutzner. So that's really reclaiming his rishus. We just had this brisa earlier on the Samaches. So the halach is bein b'shoyed, bein b'mezid oiser. Whether this person, we're not even talking about a tzedaki, we're talking about a regular person who's mevatel his rishus. But if he puts his kalim back outside in the chutzner, whether he did it forgetting that he made this deal, or whether he did it on purpose, oiser, meaning he could reclaim the chutzner even after he took the chutzner. Divrei Reb Meir, Rabbi Yosef, Ema ein oiser, change it. Say it's ein oiser, because once the people in the Movi claim the portion that the person who was mevatel relinquished, it's irrevocable, and therefore, even if this person who was mevatel put his kalim back in the chutzner, it doesn't impact anything. Abai Omar lo kasha. Abai says no. You don't have to say that. You can say kan shech zuku b'nei mavoi b'mavoi. Where do you say that once we put our kalim down, he can't take it back, like the father of Eruvin Gamliel said in the first lashon of the brisa? That's when we put our kalim down. So therefore, we picked up what he relinquished, and now he can't go back. The brisa, the Mishnah that we just learned, that says if he took his kalim out, maybe shagah, maybe mezid at asers, that's kan shelo yachziku b'nei mavoi b'mavoi. That's when the members of the mavoi didn't put their kalim out. Reuben was mevatel his kalim, but nobody put anything out. So when Reuben changes his mind and puts his kalim back out, he can reclaim what he relinquished. Vatanya, and we learned the brisa that will support this distinction between when can I be chayzer, when can the person who relinquished his rights to the chutzner be chayzer. That's if no one picked it up, if no one took it. But if someone took it, then he can no longer back out. And you see this in the following brisa. Ad sheloi nasan rishusai. What if you have a guy who did not make an Eruv with the rest of his Chatzar. And he wasn't Mevatel his Rishus yet. So at this point, their Eruv is not good because there's one person himself who did not contribute. And what happens if it's Hoitzi? He, on Shabbos, was over a Durabonon and he carried something from his house into the Chatzar. Bein b'shogig, bein b'mezid. Whether he did this b'shogig or if he did it b'mezid, meaning if he did it b'mezid, he's meaning mechal Shabbos b'mezid yochel avatal. He could still be mevatel, meaning he still has the status of a Jew who could be mevatel his rishus and not a goy where they would have to rent it from him. Divrei Reb Meir. So what Reb Meir is saying is, even if someone was mechal Shabbos b'mezid, so he's a mumar l'chal Shabbos, we still treat him like a yid, and you don't have to rent his property. He could be mevatel his property. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, b'shogig, if he was machal Shabbos b'shogig, then he retained his status of a Jew and yochel avatel, and therefore he could be mevatel. They don't need to rent it from him. But b'mezid, if he b'mezid went out and was machal Shabbos, even though it's only a derabanan, and he carried from his home into the chatzar, so now we consider him a mummer, and look at this halacha, he has a status of a goy, and eina yochel avatel. He could no longer be mevatel. And now, if they wanted his chelak, they would have to rent it from him. However, Misha Nasan Rishusai, what if he already did give over? He was already, first he was mevatel. So before he did anything wrong, he was mevatel his rishus in the chotzer. And then the hoitzi, and then he carried. Bein b'shogig, bein b'mezid, oitzer divrei Reb Meir, it would answer regardless. We discussed this yesterday. And the reason why it answers is because when he goes back to Mezid, he's relinquishing, he's retaking, he's reclaiming what he relinquished earlier, and therefore there's no more Eruv. If he did it b'shogig, the Gemara wanted to learn that it's Kana Shogig Mezid. That was one shot we had. That's Kana Shogig Mezid. And the other shot is because he's totally relinquished his rights to it completely. Divrei Reb Meir. That's what the Meir holds. Yehuda Omer, b'mezid oiser, b'shogig einei oiser. If b'mezid he went and reclaimed his property, then everyone else in the mob is going to be also for them to carry. But if he did it b'shogig, we say that his relinquished rights remain relinquished, and therefore the people in the chatzar can still carry. B'amed devar mamurim. Where do we say that if he went back and put Caleb b'mezid into the chatzar, that he's claiming back what he relinquished? That b'shaloi yichsiku b'nei mavi b'mavi. That if the other members didn't put their Caleb in to be machzik his rights to the mavi after he gave him up. But if after he was mevatel his rishos, they went and were machzik in it, now, no matter what he tries to do, he can't reclaim what he relinquished because they already were kind. And this is exactly what Abaye wants to answer, like kasher kan shechsiku b'nei mavi b'mavi, kan shelo yichsiku b'nei mavi b'mavi. So when someone relinquishes, if a yid relinquishes his rights to the chatzar, so that all the other people in the chatzar can carry, if he grabs those rights back, he messes them up. But once they put their stuff in the chatzar and they were machzik, he can no longer grab those rights back. We also have a machlokes between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. If a mummer, someone who's machal Shabbos, b'mezid, if he has a din of a goy and they have to rent from him, which is what Reb Meir said, or if he has a din of a yid, according to Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir, he has a din of a yid and he could still be mevatel. You don't have to rent from him. According to Reb Yehuda, if he was machal Shabbos b'mezid, he could no longer be mevatel. He doesn't have the status of a yid legabe bittul, and in order for the rest of the chatzar to be able to carry without him, they'd have to rent the space from him.
One is a kanoi and one isn't a kanoi.
That's right. And one's bedafke being over. And that's what the Gemara discusses now. Amar Mar, Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'loshon acheres. Rabbi Yehuda had a different nusach, which we're going to discuss now. And that was Maru Vasu Chechem b'movoi at Shaloi Techshach. You don't have an erev. Bittul doesn't work. You're dealing with a tzedeki. So you better do whatever you need to do before Shabbos. The Yaser Aleichem, because once Shabbos comes, you don't have an Erev. Al Menachihu. So from this side of the Brisa, clearly indicates that a tzedukah has the status of a goy, and that's why Rabbi Gamliel's father said that you don't have an Erev unless you rent the space from him. The problem is, Vanan Tanan Ad Shelo Yotzi. Vanan Ad Shelo Yotzi. If you look at our Mishnah doesn't have the same wording as the Brisa. Our Mishnah says you better put your kelim out before the tzedukah puts its kelim out. But you could put them out on Shabbos as long as the tzedukah doesn't put out his kelim first. The problem is, the Brisa seems to say that it's not a good bittul at all, because you have to put your kelim out even before Shabbos comes. The Mishnah seems to indicate that it is a good bittul as long as the tzedukah doesn't claim it back. So the question is a tzedukah able to do bittul, yes or no? From the Mishnah it's mashma yes, and from the Brisa it's mashma no. So the Mishnah, when the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Gamliel's father as saying, you better put your kelim out, it doesn't mean before the tzedukah puts out his kelim. It means before the sun sets, before Shabbos comes. And our Mishnah agrees to our Brisa that a tzedukah has a din of a goy, and his bittul doesn't help at all. Or you could say a different shot. In the Mishnah, where the Mishnah said that the tzedukah could be mevatel his rishos, that's where he was a machal Shabbos b'tzina. There he still has the status of a yid. But the Brisa, who says he does not have the status of a yid, and therefore bittul will not work, is kan b'mumar l'chal Shabbos b'ferhesha. You have a guy here who's machal Shabbos b'ferhesha. He has the din of a goy, and vibalt he has the din of a goy. Bittul does not work for him, and the only way to deal with a goy in the chutzner is to rent the space.
How would you know if he's Mechal Shabbos B'Tzina? How would you know it's B'Tzina? Nobody knows.
Well, then, if you don't know, then you're okay. If you see a guy B'Davka walking out on the street, then you know it's B'Fesha. Anything that's not B'Fesha, it's B'Tzina or not at all. You don't know. It doesn't matter. You can rely on it.
So in other words, you don't have to be Choshed.
That's right. That's right. And it's more than that. We're going to soon see an example of a guy who was even B'Ferhesya, and it's not called B'Ferhesya. And we'll see in a second. Kaman naz lahadatanya. Mumar, a mumar, the gilu panim, and a machutzef, hareza einem avatal rishus. They can't be avatal rishus, they have a din of goyim. So before we even figure out who this Mishnah, who this Bryce is going like, the Bryce in Minei Obey doesn't make sense. Gilu panim, mumar hava? Just because he's a machutzef, that makes him a mumar? There's a lot of fruma erlich yidin that are machutzefim also. You don't.
Zay doesn't shoot him.
What's that?
As eine is a mim, as eine offentlich kann der Chet, is a geige.
The Gemara says it's a Thomas Stopper. A lot of people don't know their Chet, but they're not shkutzim. The Gemara el mumar big yilupanim. It means someone who's a mumar with chitzpah, someone who's over various with chitzpah, that makes him into a goy, and therefore any yochel of atalashus. Someone who does things but behesha, proud of his affairs, he doesn't have the status of a goy, of a yid. Come on, who that going like? It's going according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda was the one that we just learned said that a mumar b'fehesha does not have the status of a yid. So there's a very famous story with the Panovich Rav, a beautiful, beautiful story. Rabbi Lowy once said over the story in his Shabbos Shubah Drasha. There was a debate. The Panovich Rav would travel all over the world, and he found himself once in South America, and there was a debate with posters on the telephone poles that there's going to be an open debate between the Orthodox rabbi and the Reform rabbi as to what's the true way. So he thought that was interesting. So he decided that he was going to attend, and he sat himself down there in the audience. And the emes always comes out, of course. The emes wins. So the Orthodox rabbi was really beating up on the Reform rabbi, showing how Reform Judaism is fraudulent, it's not authentic, it doesn't have continuity. And it looked like the Reform rabbi was on the ropes. Until the Reform rabbi asserted himself and said, Orthodox rabbi, Rabbi Mermelstein, or whatever his name was, Rabbi Mermelstein, wasn't that you that I saw last week drive on Shabbos to McDonald's and order a cheeseburger? And Rabbi Mermelstein turns red and he starts stuttering and stammering. So he says, so you don't need to keep your own rules. You're a fake, you're a phony, and you're a fraud. Just like all the Orthodox Jews, it's all one big fraud. You don't believe anything more than we do, and you just trying to make yourself better than us. And you guys are nothing, and Orthodoxy is nothing. And there was like a slam dunk wipeout. Everyone's in awe. The Panovich Rav gets up and says, "This is an open debate. Is it okay if I say a couple of words?" So I said, "Of course, this is an open debate. We want to hear from everybody." So he turns to the Reform rabbi and he says, "Tell me, Rabbi Jacobs, do you eat treif?" He says, "Of course I eat treif, and I'm proud of it. You think I'm going to subscribe to those antiquated biblical laws that have no relevance to today? Yes, of course I do. And do you drive on Shabbos?" He says, "Of course, and I'm proud of it. I'm not going to subscribe to these antique, outdated, repressive rules. Yes, I drive on Shabbos and I'm proud of it." So the Panovich Rav says, and that's precisely the difference between an Orthodox Jew and a Reformed Jew. It says in the pasuk, if your averes are red, kasheleg yalbinu, they'll become white like snow. If they'll be red like red wool, they'll become white. If you're so embarrassed of your averes that when you're confronted with your averes, you turn red in the face from humiliation, from embarrassment, then of course Hashem will be moichel. And that's the difference. When you confronted the Orthodox rabbi, he turned red, he was embarrassed, he was stammering, he couldn't even answer, he was so embarrassed. So sure, Orthodox people do averes. Nobody's perfect, but it hurts us, it bothers us. As long as it hurts us and it bothers us, we have hope. But you're proud of your averes. You advertise them. For you, there's no hope. And that was his slam dunk. And I remember that I was once listening to a speech from Rav David Cohen, a famous posek in New York, and he told us that he gives a shiur once a week to rabbis who have shuls in Long Island. Many of them have many members that are not Shomer Shabbos. And one night during his weekly shiur with them, the congregation Simchas Torah opened up. Congregation Simchas Torah is Congregation Gay Torah. It was the first gay shul that opened up in Manhattan. So they asked him, "So Rabbi Cohen, what do you think? What do you think of that shul?" So I wanted to catch them off guard. He told us, and I told him, "What's the problem? People there are chayiv skila because they're gay? No, you don't have any people in Yusur that are chayiv skila that are machal Shabbos. So what's the difference?" So they were like really taken aback, like that's a strange comment for Rabbi Cohen to say. So Rabbi Cohen said, "Let me tell you the difference. The difference is you don't have a big sign on your shul that says Congregation Machal Shabbos. You're a congregation. Some people are Machal Shabbos. What's coming on if you feel bad? But their claim to fame is we are the gay synagogue. Those people are flashing in everyone's faces. They're proud of it. That's a mummer. That's somebody who can't come back to Klal Yisrael. Of course, they can come back. I mean, those are right now excluded. So we have a story here. Hahud Novak b'chumrasa the medusha. A guy went out with a ring that was a masah. It wasn't a tachshit, meaning he was being over an isser of hoitzah on Shabbos. Even the chazal of Hud Nasiya, he's walking all proud down the street, and then he sees the rabbi. So right away he covers it up and puts it in his pocket because he was embarrassed. So Omar, he said, "Kigoyin zeh," a guy like that, who when he sees the rabbi, he's embarrassed, even though he walks out on the street with it. Mevatel Rishus Rav Yehuda. Even if Yehuda would hold it, that's not a mummer. He still has a din of Yisrael. He can be vatel because even though he's Machal Shabbos Professor, he still has some embarrassment from the rabbi. That's good enough. So you see that you have to be pretty far to be considered a mummer. There's a very famous story in Reb Baruch Ber's Yeshiva in Kamenetz. A lot of Bachim were swept up by the reform movement, by a scholar. And even though they were in Yeshiva, and one Shabbos, Reb Baruch Ber was walking by the dormitory and he saw cigarette smoke coming out of the window of the dormitory. So he quickly runs into the dormitory and he barges in, and there's three Bachim, they're smoking on Shabbos. So they were caught literally red-handed. So the first Bachim says, "Oi, Rosh Yeshiva, ich hab vergessen as heint is Shabbos. I forgot that it's Shabbos today." And he quickly throws the cigarette down. The second Bachim says, "Oi, ich hab vergessen I'm a ton to the Reichen in Shabbos. I forgot you're not allowed to smoke on Shabbos. And he throws his cigarette away. And the third bracha said, oh, yoy, ich hab vergessen zu vermachen the fenster. I forgot to close the window. So I don't know if this is a true story, but I always have the belief that a good story doesn't have to be a true story. So that's the Maisa. So
I was walking with my father as a kid. I remember the postman was walking by Shabbos morning when we went to shul, and he was smoking a cigarette, but before he passed us by, he threw the cigarette away. So my father says, "No, hot habitzel derech eretz."
Kigoyin zeh mevatel rishus l'Rav Yehuda.
But he told me afterwards, a couple of years later, he started walking by with a cigar in his mouth, and he did throw it out. He says, "Yes, the shunzuris."
Yeah. That's not what this Gemara is saying. Amar Huna, Eizeu Yisrael Mummer. What's the definition of a Yisrael Mummer? Zok the Gemara. And Rashi the Chashvin le Mummer l'chol mili, meaning we don't trust him for kashrus, we don't trust him for anything. Zeh hamachal Shabbos b'ferhesha. Somebody who's machal Shabbos b'ferhesha is considered a Mummer for every halacha, not only for Shabbos. Amar Nachman, where do you find that Shabbos is something that if you're machal Shabbos, you're a Mummer l'chol kula? It doesn't seem like anybody agrees with you. Ikar of Meir, if you hold a Meir, Domer chashid ledover echad chashid l'chol kula, or Meir holds any mitzvah in the Torah, if you're chashid to it means you don't keep it, automatically we don't trust you for anything in the Torah, even one mitzvah. So afilu be'echad mikol yisur in Shabbat nami. So again, the Mechal Shabbos is not unique, according to Reb Meir. It wouldn't be unique. And Ikar Rabbanon, ha'armi chashid ledover echad lo yav chashid l'chol kula. He holds there is no individual mitzvah that if you're over it, you're chashid l'chol kula, except for one. Except
Shabbos.
to have a mummer l'avodas kachavim. If you do avodah zarah, you're a mummer for everything. You're now saying a new thing of Nachman, that Shabbos makes you a mummer for anything. Nobody says that. One man says anything, and another man says only avodah zarah. So where did you get from only Shabbos? Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak, you're right. I don't mean that he's a mummer l'chol kula if he's machal Shabbos. I mean if he's machal Shabbos, he's a mummer le'inyan mitzvahs of Shabbos. For instance, litin rishus v'levatel rishus. If somebody is machal Shabbos, he might be believed for kashrus. But when it comes to Shabbos, if he didn't make an erev, or forget he can't make an erev, they would have to rent the space for him. Someone who's machal Shabbos, they would have to rent his space. He couldn't participate in the erev, nor could he make bittul. Uchiditanya, and like we learned, Yisrael Mummer, a Yisrael Mummer, is Mishamer Shabbatay B'Shuk. If he's not Mechal Shabbos B'Hesha in public, he's Shomer Shabbos, then Mevatel Rishus, then he could be Mevatel. He has to do another Yid. She'einu Mishamer Shabbatay B'Shuk. But if he's Mechal Shabbos B'Hesha, then Einu Mevatel Rishus. He cannot be Mevatel Rishus. Mishmei Amru Yisrael Noitel Rishus V'Noisen Rishus. Only a Yid could be Mevatel Rishus. Or be Kanye Rishus, if they're mevatel it to him. But if there's a guy in the chotzer, achi yaskir. The only way you could make an erev with a guy in the chotzer is if you actually rent his space. Ketzad, what is the nusach of what one must say, a yid, if they want to be mevatel their rishus? Oimerlo, you could tell the other parties, rishusi knu yaloch, my rishus, my interest in the chotzer is to you, or rishusi muvatelach, it's bottled to you.
Why can't you say by Shabbos is the only thing that says ice?
And the Gemara is going to say that momentarily. That's exactly what the Gemara is going to say momentarily. That Shabbos is a special mitzvah. So the Gemara says, "Kana vein tarach liskos." No kinyan is necessary. No shchiris is necessary. A yid can just say rishus knuyalach or rishus muvatalach, and that will be enough. Rav Ashi Omar, and this is what Rivera is saying, is Haitana hu de Chamira lo Shabbos kavod Zarah. Shabbos is special, Avodah Zarah is special, but Shabbos is also special, just like Avodah Zarah. So even though any other mitzvah, if you were over, you're not a mummer. If you're machal Shabbos, you're a mummer. Because like Yosy ben Yivnechem, at the end of the day, we make that ois. If you're mevatel that ois that Hashem created the world, you're like an Avodah Zarah. Kiditanya. Mikem, it says Adam ki Yaakov Mikem. The Torah is talking about who's allowed to bring a carbon adova, an oila, a shlomim. Who can bring?
I
So it says Mikem. Some of you can bring karbanis, not everybody. Like Olchem, who may not bring a carbon? Prat lemumur, a mumur, someone who's does averis, but for Hesia, we will not accept karbanis from him. Mikem, we learn another thing from Mikem. Bachem chalakni v'loy b'umas ha'olam, v'loy b'umas. A yid who doesn't do the mitzvahs can't bring a carbon, but a goy who doesn't do the mitzvahs, he could bring a carbon. A goy you're always accepting from. A goy you accept karbanis from. Min ha-behema, lahavi b'nei adam ha-doimin le-behema. Even a person who acts like a behema, even he could send karbanis. Mikan Ramu, from here you see that Nekabel and karbanis mipoishi Yisrael. We do accept karbanis from people who do averis. Kadeshi Yachshu b'tshuva. We don't want to push them further away. We want to try to draw them in. So this already doesn't make sense because we said a moment ago, a mummer, you don't take karbanis from him. Now you're saying poishi Yisrael, you did take karbanis from. So that's going to be a problem the Gemara is going to have to work out. And then making it even more confusing is that even though you're makabel karbanis from poishi Yisrael, chutz min ha-mummer, v'manasech yayin, v'machal Shabbos b'feresher. Except for three people, a mummer, manasech yayin, and machal Shabbos b'feresher. So this brisa, before we even can relate it to our shaila, minei ubei, doesn't make sense. First you said a mummer cannot bring a carbon, and then a second later the brisa says, so how could you equate those two? So what type of mummer does the brisa say that a mummer may not bring a carbon? That's if he violates all the mitzvahs of the Torah. He's a mummer to all the mitzvahs. Mitzvah, the poishi Yisrael that you do accept karbanis from, is b'mummer l'davar echad. If he's a poishi Yisrael, meaning there's one mitzvah he doesn't do. Okay, so far so good, but let's look at the next step. So by poishi Yisrael, it says, but a mummer does not bring a carbon. What is the mummer that the last clause in the Mishnah is referring to? If it's talking about a mummer l'chol Torah, and the brayso at the end is telling us that a mummer l'chol Torah cannot bring karbanis, that's the very first clause in the brayso. Is that a mummer miken v'loy mummer, miken v'loy mummer. So why do I need the brayso all the way to the end to repeat the same halacha that a mummer cannot bring a carbon? Zok the Gemara ilu davar echad. And if you want to say that mummer in the seifa means he only does one avera, well then kasher mitziyasa. Because the Mitzvah says if he only does one Avera, if he's a Poish Yisrael, you do accept karbanis from him. So what's the deal? Trap must be very simple. Poish Yisrael, who only are over on one Avera, the middle of the brayso says you accept karbanis because you don't want to push him away, unless the Averas, the individual Averas that he's over, are severe. Chutz min ha-mummer l'nasech. So mummer isn't a separate category. It's a heading to the following categories: mummer l'nasech, someone who b'mezid does avoid zara, or a mummer l'chal Shabbos b'vehesher, or a mummer to be mechal Shabbos b'vehesher. So someone who's a mummer l'avoid zara or mummer l'chal Shabbos, those two are special averos that are considered a mummer l'chal Torah kula. Alma avoid zara v'Shabbos ki adad inin shmamino, just like what Beryl said, that Shabbos is special, and Shabbos will make someone into a mummer l'chal Torah kula. The standard case, there's 5 people in the Chatzar, they all have to make an Eruv, they're all Yidden, and one fellow forgot and he didn't join the Eruv. So because of him, everybody is also to carry. So what does he do to rectify that so that his neighbor shouldn't be angry with him? He's mevatel his reshus. He said, I'm mevatel my reshus to you. And now at least they're allowed to carry. Now they're allowed to carry in their homes and from their homes to their chatzeris, but are they allowed to carry into my home? Zok the Mishnah, Beisai Osur Bilahachos Umilahaitzi, Loi Vilahem. His home, he can't carry from his home into the Chatzar, but neither can anybody else carry from his home into the Chatzar, because his home is excluded from the Chatzar. The Chatzar now he gave up and it belongs to everybody. His home is exclusive to him, and therefore no one's allowed to carry from his home into the Chatzar. But everybody's allowed to carry from their homes into the Chatzar. Vishalahem. Now, This fellow excluded himself, and he was mevatel his chotzer to them. Is he allowed to go into one of their homes and carry from their home into the chotzer? Zok the Mishnah mutarin aloy v'lahem. Everybody, even this fellow who was not part of the Erev, can carry from all the other homes in the chotzer into the chotzer. And the logic is very simple. It's not about him. It's about the property. The properties of all the other inhabitants of that chotzer was merged with the chotzer, and therefore it's all one rishos for anybody. And therefore, both himself as well as anybody else can carry from all those homes into the chotzer. What about notnu loy rishusam? What happens if they were in their chotzer and he ruined it for them? He didn't make an Erev, so he was mevatel his rishus to them. So we said if he's mevatel his rishus to them, everyone's allowed to carry in their houses. What if he said, listen, I need to carry? So they were all mevatel their rishus to him, and now he's the sole owner. The law is hu mutter. He could carry now because he now the entire mavi, the entire chotzer, all the houses, everything now is his rishus. Because the same way he could be mevatel to them, they could be mevatel to him. But for hein asurim, they won't be able to carry from his house into the mavi. And the question is, why not? If it's all one, it should be mutter. So that's we're going to have to see why. What happens if there's 5 people in the mavi? Eruvin, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. Yehuda and Yisachar did not make an Erev. Eruvin, Shimon, and Levi, they made an Erev. So 3 out of 5 made an Erev. The other 2, Levi and Yehuda, is messing everybody up. So what happened was, if there's 2 people, then they're going to be usher. So if these 2 people, Levi and Yehuda, were both mevatel their rights in the chotzer to the 3 people who made the Erev, that will be fine. The 3 people that made the Erev can carry. But if the 3 people that made the Erev are mevatel their rights to the chotzer to Levi and Yehuda who didn't make the Erev, it'll still be a problem. Why will it still be a problem? Because even though they were mevatel their rights to the chotzer, there's still 2 of us who didn't make the Erev, Levi and Yehuda. So we still aster on each other. So therefore, we wouldn't be able to carry. So you might ask, okay, they were mevatel it to me and to my friend. So Levi and Yehuda now own the whole property, but they don't have an Erev. So why can't one of these 2 guys now go and be mevatel whatever he has? So Levi can be mevatel whatever he has to Yehuda, and now Yehuda will be the sole owner. Why can't that work? It doesn't work, and the Gemara is going to discuss it. Now, Dr. Brishneweiter, a single renegade who was not part of the Erev with his group can both be mevatel his rishus to the group, or the group could be mevatel their rishus to him. But shnayim, if there's 2 people who didn't participate in the Erev, noistin rishus, they can be mevatel their rishus to the people who made the Erev, and the people who made the Erev will be able to carry. But ve'ein noitlim rishus. But if there's 2 people who didn't make the Erev, the 3 people who made the Erev cannot be mevatel their rishus to those 3 people, to those 2 people. Just like we said in the Mishnah a moment ago. When is the right time to make the bittul? So based on what we learned until now, you could even do it on Shabbos. But Bishami doesn't agree to that. Even a bittul, if we didn't make an Erev and it's right before Shabbos, there's no time to make an Erev. Everybody made an Erev, one guy wasn't included, and it's right before Shabbos. And the one guy who wasn't included doesn't have a chance to join the Erev, so he can make bittul. But he has to make it before Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, the person who's not part of the Erev, who's messing the Erev up, could be mevatel his chayv. Now, a new case, and this is the case that we just discussed earlier. Misha Nasan Rishusai, he relinquished his chus, and after that, v'hoitzi, he carried. Ben b'shogi, ben b'mezet hareza oyster. He's going to answer because he's reclaiming what he took. Divi Rav Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, b'mezet oyster b'shogi oyster. B'mezet, he's actively reclaiming what he gave away. But if he only did it by mistake, we won't say that that's called reclaiming. So let's analyze this Mishnah. Beisai Huda Aser, Hachatzeiroi Shari. It's his house that's Aser. Because if it says Anshe Chater Sheshakach Echad Mehen, Even though everybody can carry in the chutzner, his own house, we say he was not mevatel, and therefore nobody's allowed to carry from his house to the chutzner. Break the Gemara. People are allowed to carry in the chutzner, they're just not allowed to carry from his house to the chutzner. Well, let's think about it. Either bottle, if he was mevatel all of his rights, well then Beis Hayom, so then he should have been mevatel his house as well. And why can't people carry in and out of his house? Either loy bottle, and if he didn't make bittul, well then chatzera am shari. So then he still has his rights in the chutzner. How can people carry from their homes into the chutzner? And for the Gemara, ha'b'may askinan, because bitul rishus chatzeroi, v'loy bitul rishus beisai. He specifically said, I want to be mevatel the rights that I have in the chutzner, but I want to retain the rights that I have in my bias. And of course, this is going to the Rabbanan, because we have Machlokes Rabbanan and Eliezer. So Zok to Gemara, he was mevatel the rishus that he has in his chutzner, v'loy bitul rishus beisai, but he retained control of his house. The Kosavi Rabbanan and the Rabbanan hold, mevatel rishus chatzeroi, rishus beisai loy bitul. If someone's mevatel his rishus of his chutzner, it doesn't automatically mean that he was mevatel his house. The reason why Rabbi Eliezer said that when you mevatel your chutzner, you're automatically mevatel your house, is because it's really impossible to live in a home without having access to the chutzner. Because their homes were very small, and all of their items they stored in their chutzner. Their closets were their chutzner, their pantry was their chutzner. So if you squeeze someone into a little house, he can't live properly there. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer learned that when you mevatel your chutzner, you automatically mevatel your house. But Rabbanan argue, and they say, even though I was mevatel my chutzner, I wasn't mevatel my house. And they hold the dire inish b'bayis b'lei chutzner, because we hold the person would be able to live contained within his house without overspilling into the chutzner. V'shalahen muterloi, and the reason why the person who was mevatel his rights to the chutzner, he's allowed to walk in and out of their houses carrying. Shalahen muterloi v'lahen, my time. What's the reason? When he carries from their house into the chutzner, carrying because he's their guest. And the same way, to them, it's all one big rishos. Him being a guest by them also can carry from their homes into the chutzner.
They obviously didn't have a winter like us. Because it's pashut that you can live in your house without the chutzner.
Probably right. In Bavel, it's like Iraq. It's probably warm there all year. What if, again, you have a chutzner of, let's say, 5 people, and one of the 5 did not make the air? Because of that, everyone's also to carry. So everybody in the chutzner were mevatel their das, their chutzner, their rights in the chutzner to the one person who didn't. So the law is who mutter, he's allowed to carry everywhere. The they're not allowed to carry. In fact, I don't understand. If he's allowed to carry everywhere, why can't they be like his guests? And they should also be able to carry everywhere. Just like on the flip side, when he was mevatel his chelik to them, we say as their guest he can carry everywhere. In fact, let them be like his guests. Ever the Gemara, if one person joins a community of 5, that's called a guest. But if 5 people join a community of 1, that's not called a guest. That's called an invasion. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to carry all those people wouldn't be able to carry if they were mevatel their rights in the chutzner to the individual.
Today's minyanim that we have in the yard minyanim, with all this is all negeya.
That's right. That's right. You're allowed to carry from the house to the yard.
Yeah, this is negeya for today, Taka.
If you don't hold of the city area, it's negeya. If you hold the city area, we're all part of one big.
One more, well, yeah.
Shemami no. So interesting. If you look at the Mishnah, how it reads, what happened over here? First, what happened was, and he was mevatel his rishus to them. So the Mishnah tells us that anyone can carry from their homes into the chutzner. Then afterwards, the Mishnah says, what happened after that? So Friday night, he was carrying by them, and he's their guest. And then Shabbos morning, what if they were then mevatel their rishus to him? So then it says, "Who motivated Asur?" So, Frank Gemara, it seems to be from our Mishnah. It seems to show from our Mishnah that Shemami no mevatlin the choshen and mevatlin. This would be a riot to Rav. We had a machlokes earlier between Rav and Shmuel. If we can half a day, if there's two shots for him, half a day, I'll be mevatel my part of the chutzah to you. This way you can carry and do whatever you need to do. And then later on, you'll be mevatel yours to me, and then I'll do whatever I have to do. From our Mishnah, you see, you can go back and forth. Because our Mishnah discussed the story where first the Yochid is mevatel to the Rabbim, and then later on the Rabbim are mevatel to the Yochid. Zok Gemara, no, we're not talking about one story that happened on the same Shabbos. We're talking about two isolated events. Havi Gomer, what if the story never happened where he was mevatel his rishus to them? What if the story happened only the day where mevatel their rishus to him? Then who mutar vein asurin? So you can't bring a riot from here that you can go back and forth. Zok Teil Gemara Vayta, Hayu Shnayim Oishim Zelzeh. Fact Gemara Pshita. It's pashut that if there's two people left, so let's say there's 5 people in this chutzner, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi made an Eruv, and Yehuda and Yisachar did not make the Eruv. So Yehuda and Yisachar are two individuals that didn't make an Eruv at all. So even if Reuben, Shimon, and Levi are mevatel their rights in the chutzner to Yehuda and Yisachar still can't carry because Yehuda and Yisachar didn't make an Eruv amongst themselves. So what is the chiddush of the Mishnah? That Shnayim Oishim Zelzeh. That's very elementary. So tomorrow la tzricha the hader chad minayu uboto leila chavrei. After the Reuben, Shimon, and Levi were mevatel their rights to Yehuda and Yisachar, Yehuda turned around and told Yisachar, "Now I'm mevatel whatever I have to you." So now it seems like Yisachar has everything. So why can't we carry in there, or why can't at least Yisachar carry in there? Because now it's all his rishus. Zok the Gemara. You might have thought that would be mutter. Kamash V'lam, our Mishnah, and it doesn't work for Yehuda to go turn around now and be mevatel whatever he has to Yisachar. That won't work. Why? And I don't have pshat, but I'm going to read you the words, and I'll read you the Rashi, and maybe together we'll get pshat. The kivan the beidna the bottle, what's happening over here? Reuben, Shimon, and Levi made an Eruv. Yehuda and Yisachar messed up the group, and they didn't make an Eruv. So when Reuben, Shimon, and Levi are mevatel their right to the chutzner to Yehuda and Yisachar, at that moment nobody can carry because you still have Yehuda and Yisachar. So therefore, Zok the Gemara, since at that moment when everybody gave their rights to Yehuda and Yisachar, neither Yehuda nor Yisachar was able to carry at that point. We say that they're not kaina, and therefore Yehuda cannot turn around now and give their portion, the portion from Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, to Yisachar, because since he didn't acquire it, because it didn't work, he didn't acquire it, and he can't give it over. Let's move Rashi inside, and then I'm going to ask you if you can help me understand just Pashup Pshat in this Gemara. So Zok Gemara, Mal Detema Lishtaru. You might think it should be mutter, because Yehuda should now just give everything over to Yisachar. The Havalu, it's like Chamisha Shashruim B'chotzer V'lo Eruvin. Let's say 5 people were all on the Chotzer and there was no Eruv made at all. The Mevatler Rishus L'chad Minayu. They could all be Mevatler their Rishus to one person. As long as at the end of the day, all the rights belong to one person, there shouldn't be a problem with carrying. Kamash Malam, and this is a very important Rashi, I have to ask everybody to help me out over here. The Loi Dami. You cannot compare this to a case where there's only one guy getting the rights. Dilu Hasam, in the case where all 5 people at a chutzner were being mevatel their rights to one person, kol chad v'chad mevatel le rishusei. Every individual is being mevatel their rishus directly to the recipient that's going to be able to carry. Aval hacha in this case, even the shar b'nei chutzner lav lahai de payish luchudei batli elul tervayu. When Reuben, Shimon, and Levi were mevatel their rights in the chutzner, they weren't mevatel at all to Yisachar alone. They were mevatel combined to Yehuda and Yisachar. Therefore, in order for all these rights to get to Yisachar, Yehuda has to turn around and be mevatel what he got from them and give it to Yisachar. So ki hader chad mevatel idich reshusa ki hader chad mevatel idich. When Yehuda now turns around to be mevatel his reshus to Yisachar, reshusa the day motzi levatule. The reshus that always belonged to him, his original portion, his original house and rights to the chutzner, that he can give over and relinquish to Yisachar. But Rishus the Akli Lechavre, the Rishus that he got from Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, who were Mevatla to him, that Leimatul of Tula, he can't turn around and pass that to Yisachar. Why not? The big why. The Kivon the Be'ida the Botlu Hanach Kamoy Rishusayu. Because at the moment that Yehuda received the share from Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Afilu Hachi Lehoya Lahai Mevatel Shoyusa Bahai Chatzar. This Mevatel, this Yehuda, even when he received the rights from Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, he still couldn't have carried. Why couldn't he have carried? Because there's Yisachar here as well. So therefore, at no point was I able to carry. Ishtakach, because of that, took Rashi, the bittul the kamoi loyahani. The bittul that the first group did, the bittul that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi did to Yisachar and Yehuda, that doesn't work. Because that didn't create a scenario where either of them could carry. And therefore, v'chihadim avat lahai loymotzi lachnui rishus of the two, the loy kanya. Rashi, because of that, I'm a koinit. So why don't I understand it? Because what Rashi is saying is, since Yehuda and Yisachar, neither of them were able to carry when they received the rights from Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, since they couldn't, they did get the rights. They absolutely got the rights. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi were mevatel their rights, so Yehuda and Yisachar got those rights. But those rights didn't grant them permission to carry. So Dr. Rashi, since their rights didn't grant them permission to carry, they're not even koinit. And that to me is difficult to understand. Because what is Yeridea and Orachaim have to do with Choshen Mishpat? If you granted something to me, it's mine. So I can give it away. I understand if Rashi would have said that even though Yehuda gives his stuff to Yisachar, it won't work, because since it didn't work by him, we don't let him carry with it. But to say that it's actually not koina, that's something that I have a little bit of difficulty understanding. So I'm not sure. Okay, let's see the Gemara Vayter. If anybody can get me some clarity in this, I would be very much appreciative. Zok El Gemara Vayter. The Mishnah at the end says, "She'echad noishin rishos v'noitel rishos, shnayim noisnim rishos v'loy noitel rishos." Why did the Mishnah need to offer this final clause? This final clause, everything in that final clause, is already included in the halachas that the Mishnah mentioned earlier. The Mishnah already mentioned that a yachid could be nois in rishos, a yachid could be noitel rishos, and that shnayim could give rishos and not take. So why do I need the Mishnah to review all these cases again? Hasulamali, if you want to tell me a chiddush that a yachid could give rishos, Tanina, the Mishnah says it earlier. If everybody could be mevatel the rishus to a yachid, Tanina, we learned that as well in the Mishnah. The Gemara Sefer Tzricha. The echad noish rishus v'noitel rishus is talking about a chiddush. The Tana only threw it in agav the next thing that he said, and he said shnayim noislin rishus. Two people can give rishus. For the Gemara Hanami Pshita. That's also poshut. Two people, if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi made a eruv, and Yehudi and Yisachar didn't, Yehudi and Yisachar could be mevatel their rishus to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and then Reuven, Shimon, and Levi can carry Pshita. Why should it be? Why should you think that you need the Mishnah to reiterate that? So tomorrow, Ma'al you might think Ligzer Dilma Asil Tulahu. If you say that Yehuda and Yisachar could be mevatel their rishus to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and then we'll let Reuven, Shimon, and Levi carry, people might also think that the opposite is true. That if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are mevatel their rishus to Yehuda and Yisachar, that Yehuda and Yisachar could also carry. So you might think you make such a gzeira. Kamashwan, you don't make such a gzeira. And then in fact, Yisachar and Yehuda could be mevatel their rishus to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and they'll be able to carry. Even though Reuven, Shimon, and Levi cannot be mevatel their rishus to Yehuda and Yisachar because it won't work. Zok Gemara Vayter, the ein noitlin rishus. Two people like Yisachar and Yehuda, if they weren't part of the Erev, they cannot accept rishus from the other three. Like we said already, because that would require an additional step that now Yehuda would have to go and give over whatever he has to Yisachar, so it's only one owner. And since when he received whatever he received from Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, it didn't allow him to carry, we say he's not kohen. Why did the Mishnah have to repeat that same halacha? That Shnai Mei Noit L'Reshus. The Mishnah already said it explicitly earlier. The Chiddush is that I'm not talking about a relative case where Reuben, Shimon, and Levi said, we're giving you our chutzner. What if Reuben, Shimon, and Levi told Yehuda, we're giving you our chelik in the chutzner, not for you, we're giving it to you so that you should go and be makna it to Yehuda, like you're even a shliach. So maybe there, in that case, we say it's almost like they gave it directly to Yisachar. Nevertheless, it still will not work. Even if the first three, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, when they were mevatel their rights in the chutzner, they said kni al manas lahaknois. They gave it to Yehuda. They said, we're giving it to you so that you should give it over to Yisachar. And then he turned around and was mevatel to his chaver. Loy mystery high basra. Yisachar getting it all from Yehuda would still not be able to carry. The you might say that it lies like a shliach. It's not going through Yehuda. They're just telling Yehuda to be kohen for Yisachar. Since Yehuda himself, when he received the bittul from Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, he wouldn't be able to carry at that point. He cannot pass on their schusim to Yisachar unless he himself would have been able to carry at a certain point. Abaya asked a shaila from Rabbi. We actually had the shaila already. 5 people live in a chutzner. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, and Yisachar all share a chutzner. There's 5 houses in this chutzner. And the chutzner achas. And one of them, let's say Yisachar, did not join in the Eruv. So because of that, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda cannot carry. So Yisachar has to be mevatel his rights in the chutzner to allow everybody to carry. So how is he mevatel? Kishahu mevatel reshusay. Now what happened here is everybody else made an Eruv. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda made an Eruv. It's only Yisachar that was out. So when Yisachar is mevatel his reshus to the group, tzarich levatel l'chol echad ve'echad, does he have to say I'll be mevatel to Reuven and to Shimon and to Levi and to Yehuda? Or maybe he'll say I'm being mevatel only to Reuven. But once Reuven gets it, since Reuven is already combined with everybody else through an Eruv, that's good enough, and they'll all be able to carry.
And we don't say Zochen Eladim Shalai B'Fanav.
Well, that's a very good question. And a couple of blot ago, the Gemara said that the reason why that wouldn't work is because it's possible that when I made the Eruv, I'm only sharing in what my reshus is at the moment that I got the Eruv. And if you give me something later, that doesn't automatically make everybody get a chelik in it.
No, but you're giving him, you're doing something for his benefit without him knowing.
So you're suggesting, what if Yisachar gave it to Reuben, and Reuben said, I'm being kind of this on behalf of all my buddies.
Yeah,
that for sure would work. But the question here is, he said, I'm not giving it to all your buddies. I'm only giving it to you. Is that good enough since he is mu'urav with the rest of them? Amarle, Rabba answered right off the bat, Tzarech levatel l'chol echad ve'echad. You need to be mevatel for everybody. Now the Gemara is going to list off a relatively complex brisa with many different cases, but the raya from the very first case that the Gemara is going to bring is going to be a very simple and easy to understand raya. So let's read the brisa. Esvei, echad shaloi irev. There's a group of people. So Rashi says there's 3 people in the chutzner. 2 of them made an Eruv and the third one didn't. So Reuven and Shimon made an Eruv together, and Levi did not join the Eruv. So echad shaloi irev. So the law is noisin reshusoi leechad sheirev. He can give over his chelik to one person who made an Eruv. And this is what the Gemara is going to bring a raya from. Right over here you see that Levi, who wasn't part of the Eruv, can give it over to echad sheirev. That means there was Reuven and Shimon who made an Eruv, and Levi only has to give over his chelik to one of the two people who made the eruv. That's
What does
what the
giving
kasha is
over
going to
mean?
be that Abai is going to ask Rabbah.
What does
So this is a
giving
very
over
simple
mean?
kasha. The problem is there's another 4 cases in the Brisa that aren't relevant to our sugya, but we still need to learn them, and they're still gishmak.
What does giving
Yosy,
over mean?
what's the difference in giving over and being mevatel?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Earlier in the Gemara, we had it. One of the portion one said Noish Rishusha doesn't just mean he was mevatel it; it means they were machzik in it also. But it's the same thing. So let's the first case echad shleirav and Noish Rishusha echad shleirav. That's going to be a bayis raya that you only have to be mevatel to one of the two people in the eruv. Next case, shnayim shleirav, 2 people made an eruv. Noisnin Rishuson le'echad shleirav. So this is the same case. Reuven and Shimon made an eruv. Levi didn't. Reuven and Shimon could be mevatel what they have to Levi. That's a simple case. We actually learned that in the Mishnah. Ushnayim shelo yirvu, noisnin Rishuson l'shnayim she'irvu. Again, Reuven and Shimon made an eruv together. Levi and Yehuda did not make an eruv. Levi and Yehuda can each be mevatel their chelik to Reuven and Shimon, and then Reuven and Shimon will be able to carry there. Or oila echad shelo yirvu. Or if Reuven and Shimon didn't make an Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, nobody made an eruv. Reuven and Shimon could be mevatel their rights to Levi, and the Levi will be able to carry. Avoloi echad she'irev noisin rishusoi la'echad shelo irev. One person that made the one person that made an eruv cannot give rishus to someone else who didn't make an eruv. So let's think a second. If there's only 2 people, what do you mean echad she'irev? So Rashi tells us, Aval ein echad she'irev echad. So you have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven made an eruv with Shimon. He cannot noisin rishusay l'yochad shlishi shedorim. So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi live in the chutzner. Reuven and Shimon made an eruv. He cannot give over his chelik to Levi. L'yochad shlishi shedorim v'lo yirav. Why? The chibatel le'iu rishusay. Even if Reuven gives over whatever he has rights to Levi, Akati kechavre dazerle. Shimon didn't do that. So if Reuven and Shimon made an eruv together, even if Reuven is mevatel his rights to Levi, and Shimon didn't, Levi doesn't have all the rights. So therefore it still remains usher. And in the final cases, if Reuven and Shimon made an eruv together, they can't relinquish their rights. The 2 people who didn't make an eruv, and that we learned also in our Mishnah, because even if Reuven and Shimon are mevatel themselves to Levi and Yehuda, it's still usher because Levi and Yehuda still didn't make an eruv. And in the final cases, vein shnayim shelo yirvu, and 2 people that did not make an eruv, noisnu v'shuson l'shnayim shelo yirvu. So if you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, if Reuven and Shimon give over whatever they have to Levi and Yehuda, and Levi and Yehuda didn't make an eruv, of course it wouldn't work. So these are all the cases of the Brisa, but what's relevant is the first case. The Tani Miyas, Reisha, echad shelo yirev, noisin rishusay lechad she'irev. So echad shelo yirev, you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Levi did not make an eruv. Reuven and Shimon made the eruv. So Levi, the echad shelo yirev, could be noisin rishusay lechad she'irev. He only has to give his rishus over to either Reuven or Shimon, one of the 2 people who made the eruv. Hekadami. Let's figure this out. Either leg achvina b'hadei, if there's no Reuven and Shimon, they're just Reuven and Levi, b'hadiman eruv. Who did Reuven make an eruv with if there wasn't Shimon? So you can't say it's a case where there's only Reuven and Levi, because it says echad she'irev. Who did this Reuven make an eruv with? So it must be there's a Shimon here. So there's a Reuven and a Shimon who made an eruv together, and it's saying that the Levi who didn't make the eruv could be mevatel his rishus to one of the 2 people in the eruv, Reuven or Shimon. El Pshita, the Ikach Bina Badei, there's a Reuven and a Shimon. The Katani, Echad She'irev. The Bride says beferish that Levi only has to be mevatel his rishus only to one of the 2 people who made the eruv, either Reuven or Shimon. So Abai has a very good raya from here that you don't have to be Mavatal to everybody. It's enough to be Mavatal to one of the people in the Erev. So that's Shver on Rabbah, because Rabbah said right off the bat, you have to be Mavatal, your schos, to every single person in the Erev. More of a Rabbah, the Havum is. Sure, at the beginning of Shabbos, Reuven had a shutfis with Shimon, but Shimon died on Shabbos. So Shimon died on Shabbos. Now there's only one person to deal with, and that's what it means. A huge doichik. But that's what the Gemara wants to say. The problem is let's say there was Reuven and Shimon, and they shared a chutzner, and Shimon died. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't help because Shimon has children. Shimon has Yerushim. So what does it help if Shimon died? Then it's Reuven and Shimon's Yerushim, and you're right back where you started from. So what's Machlal this teretz? So Rashi says that this case has to be where this is not in their chutzner. It's speaking where Reuven and Shimon went on a camping trip, and in the middle of nowhere they decided to spend Shabbos, and they made an Erev around them, and they each have their own tents, and they share the common area in that camping area. But Shimon doesn't own it. It's a public area. No one owns anything. And there Shimon died. So there is nothing for anybody to be Irish. So that's the case that we're talking about. Before Shabbos, there was a Reuven and a Shimon that made an Erev, so that they can carry in that whole area. On Shabbos, Shimon died. And then, if Levi's there with them, Levi can just be mevatel his chelik to Reuven, because there is no Shimon. In fact, Gemara, if that's the doichik case you want to say, either have or miss, if you're saying it's speaking in a case where there was a third party who then died, well, Ema Seifa. Look at the Seifa. Aval ein echad she'irev noichin reshusoi le'echad shelo irev. If you have Reuven and Shimon that made an Erev, one of the two, Reuven or Shimon, cannot just be mevatel his reshus to Levi. And Rashi told us the reason why is because even if Reuven will be mevatel his reshus to Levi, if Shimon doesn't, Levi still doesn't have all the reshus, so it doesn't help. But vida hadu miss, if we're talking about a case where someone died on Shabbos, so then at that point there is no more Shimon there. So if Reuven is mevatel, whatever he has to Levi, that's all there is. Amai loy. So now someone died in the Reisha and died in the Sefer. Alapshita, the Isay. It doesn't make sense to say that the guy died. The guy's there the whole time. When with the Sefer Isay, if in the Sefer the case has to be where Reuven and Shimon are both alive, and therefore both Reuven and Shimon would have to relinquish their rights to Levi. It wouldn't be enough if only Reuven or only Shimon relinquished his rights to Levi. Then Reisha Nami, Isay, you'd have to say that in the Reisha, Reuven and Shimon are both alive. And yet the Brisa says that Levi only has to be mevatel himself to either Reuven or Shimon, not to both. So Gemara, who said? Mida area? Who said? Hachadisa, Hachadisa. Maybe the Reisha is speaking where Shimon died, and the Sefer is speaking where he didn't die. Mechadesa. Okay, I think we should stop here. Ayin is today's daf. So now we're really less than a daf behind. And every day we'll push to get a little further. And Mitchum, hopefully within a couple of days, we'll be fully caught up.
Yossi,
Yes.
going back to your difficulty with Rashi on
Yes.
right?
On the bottom,
yeah.
of the page.
Is there such a concept of ownership without kinyan? Like, how does someone?
Well, for the purposes of Erev, if he's mevatel his das from there, so there's no other ownership there to create the rabbin, because besides him, everybody else is unified. Unless what you're trying to say is this whole kinyan thing is not a real choshen mishpat kinyan. It's also part of the rules of Erev.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I hear very stuck. I think that's a pshat. I think what you're saying is a pshat. The kniya that Rashi's saying, the haloi kanya, that Yehuda wasn't even kanya anything from Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, it doesn't really mean a choshen mishpat kinyan. He doesn't own anything here. It's this make believe kinyan that we use to allow Erev Chetzeris to work.
Right.
I like that shot very much, and I think that is the only shot, and I'm happy that you're highlighting it because you're asking you anyway. You're highlighting it anyway by the whole concept of Aruba Chetzeris. We're not talking about real kinyanim anyway, because a real kinyan doesn't just work by me being the battle. Somebody actually has to pick it up.
Right.
Okay. Shkoyach. I like that very much.
Shkoyach to you.
You're enlightening us.
Shkoyach,
Okay,
have a
now
great
let me ask
day.
you something, Yosy.
Yes.
On what station are you? 1948 or 7613?
Just today was 1948, but normally we're on 7613.
7613. That's Tuesday, Wednesday.
Thursday and Friday. And Mata
And
Shabbos
Monday.
1948. And Sunday morning is only one that I have to see Sunday morning where it's busy and when it's not. So every day it's always 7613. Mata Shabbos is always 1948. And Sunday morning is always the wild card.
Okay.
Shkoyach.
See you on Tuesday, Yes Hashem.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Yossi.
Shkoyach, fancy. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day. Today is a very victorious day. I mentioned last night, today was the day that Ariel Sharon succeeded in crossing the Suez and cutting off the Third Army of Egypt, which ultimately led to them collapsing, and that was the ultimate Yeshua in the Yom Kippur War. So today should be a day of bracha for everybody all the time. We
Amen.
should have
Amen.
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 Good Chodesh to everybody.
And I'm a pull it to Biden. To Biden.
Online.
Amen.
Okay, viva.